Milfs, Cougars. These are terms I assume many people are familiar with, and I would assume further that if you are 50 or below, almost everyone will have heard of these terms, MILF and Cougar. Similar but distinct. A MILF obviously is a mother I would like to boink, and a Cougar is a term I think that's gone a little out of fashion, but it still exists, and that's simply a woman who's older but still boinkable, or basically attractive. The ages vary a lot, but traditionally MILFs and Cougars were sort of within the 35 to 45 range. But apparently, in recent years, there's been a new trend that has emerged among Zoomers, and that trend is the trend of hag maxing. Now, what could hag maxing be? Well, hag obviously is a little bit hyperbolic because hag in this sense is referring to what would traditionally be called cougars, maybe some MILFs in some instances. And the logic behind it is pretty simple, at least in the eyes of the Zoomers who are pursuing this. It's basically the idea that if you are a Zoomer, male, and you're having trouble acquiring a female, and many of them do, after all, there is a documented, even in a scientific sense, dating crisis of some sorts, and you've tried all your options, and you've looks-maxed, and you've mewed-maxed, and you've done all these things, but you just consistently fail with women, females your age or slightly older or younger, then the next logical step, they would argue, is hag maxing. And hag maxing is essentially this notion that you're going to have a better chance with a woman who's older. Now, why do they think this? Well, it's a bit complicated. First, we need to briefly talk about, and this is a related issue, this notion that's been prominent in the manosphere probably for years, the notion of the wall. The wall is only partially true. I've talked about this in previous videos, but I think it's worthy of talking about and underscoring it again. This notion that women past a certain age, 45, 35, 40, they lose all their options is just not true. Women always have more options than men typically. And the people who don't believe that, or the people who are saying otherwise, they're really referring to, again, to a top 20% of men or something. You know, the Pareto distribution. Yes, the top 20% of men throughout their lifetimes can get access to a lot of different women. Leonardo DiCaprio doesn't look particularly good anymore, but he's still boinking 25-year-olds. That's not the majority of men. So women always have more options, socially or otherwise. So need to get that out of the way. But the idea behind hag maxing is that with somewhat fewer options at age 35 or 40, compared to when you're 25 or 20 as a woman in your prime, that a lot of these women might be receptive and responsive to a young guy taking interest in them. After all, they don't have as many options, and they're also not turning heads like they used to, because women typically look quite different at 40 than when they did at 20. So along comes the hag maxer and says, look, I'm only 21, 25, and I find you fit and fine. Why not? A lot of these women that decide to engage in these hag maxing relationships, in as much as they exist, I've only talked to a few online, so the amount of young men who are Zoomers that are actually pursuing this is impossible to know. Well, these women feel flattered by the fact that they're being approached by these young guys, and they are being valued for what has, at least in most cases, been their chief asset, their physical beauty. And from one instance of a guy I talked to, apparently he's in a long-term relationship in a situation that could only be called hag maxing. He's 26, and the woman he's together with is 38. Now, there's a lot to be said about this. The first thing you could say is, this a good strategy? Well, I don't know. What's a good strategy these days if you're a Zoomer? You know, you can geo-max, you can passport max, you can hag max, you can looks max. You can max everything out, but generally speaking, in my observation, humble opinion, if you haven't had success in the first, say, 20, 25 years of your life, it's possible to get out of that, but usually it's pretty tough. After all, these are the most formative years of your life. These are the times when you have the most opportunities, at least potentially. And if you haven't been born with the genetic gifts, i.e. looks and height, that would garner attention in the first place, well, there's certain things you can do, but there are limitations there. So at the end of the day, hag maxing is just one other thing that young Zoomers can do in order to optimize their opportunities to date and have sex. But I don't think it's a good idea, and this is just my opinion. Of course, normally what happens in age-differentiated relationships is usually the man is older. It's not always the case, but usually the man, for a very obvious reason, status, money, blah, 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 Women value that, and rarely the other way around, since women who are older typically don't look as good as when they were younger. But there are a couple of things here that I think are not a good idea if you're a Zoomer, and this is just my opinion. As you get older, all human beings carry with them something we call baggage. Not the baggage you take to the airport or on a trip, but the psychological and emotional baggage of your life. I have baggage, your parents have baggage, everyone has baggage. Men, women, everyone has baggage, unless they've been living in a kind of pristine bubble where they've never experienced any hardship, any problems, any issues whatsoever. Maybe those people exist. I'm inclined to think that they don't. And the problem with baggage and the psychological effects of baggage is they leave a lasting impression on you and how you think about the world, and above all, how you interact with people. So if you're a 20-year-old guy and you're thinking about hag maxing with a 35-year-old woman, rest assured, those 15 years make a huge difference, and not just in the ways you think that they do. A decent-looking 35-year-old woman almost certainly has baggage from relationships that didn't work out, because if you're dating her or boinking her, she's probably not in a relationship in most cases, one would hope. And the thing about baggage is it's not uniform. There's no specific form it takes. There's no general description about baggage. Of course, you could say a couple of things, such as the experiences you had in a relationship, and not just in relationships, also in friendships with your family, just life in general, will shape you. And so the one good thing, there are many good things actually, but the one good thing psychologically about being young, not always the case, but frequently, is you have less baggage than somebody who's old. The older you get, the more experiences you accumulate, the greater the baggage grows, and that can have a huge effect on how you interact with people, and probably an even huger effect in the context of a relationship. So baggage is one of the big ones. Another one is life trajectory and goals. If you're a 20-year-old guy dating a 35-year-old woman, then presumably, unless she's very abnormal, very different, her goals are going to be very different from the goals you have. And what she wants to achieve in life at that age is going to be different as well. So you think about something like starting a family or getting married. Is that really your intention if you're in your young 20s as a Zoomer and you decide to engage in hag maxing? I'm not saying don't do hag maxing. You can do it if you want. But you should be aware of these factors, the baggage, and the fact that people of greatly differentiated ages, especially in terms of women who are much older than young guys, will probably almost certainly have very different notions of what they want from life. And there's also the issue of, for lack of a better word, maturity. When you're in your early 20s, you're not fully mature. I'm not saying that women who are 35 plus are perfectly mature or wise or anything like that. But essentially in your early 20s, you're sort of still just a kid. So your decision making is not going to be necessarily the best, which is not to say that women are always going to make good decisions either. We're well aware that they don't frequently. But at the end of the day, all this talk about hag maxing, in as much as it's a real phenomenon, I think there are some people that choose to do it, is probably a lot worse idea than some of the other ideas that the various pilospheres have come up with. Geomaxing, I think, even though I'm critical of it in some respects, for example, I don't think it's necessarily the best way to get a long-term relationship, although it might be a good way of achieving lots of boinking. It's still probably better than huge age gap relationships when you're early 20s with women that are close to 40. Baggage, expectations, life trajectories, goals, all of these things are just going to be so different. So ultimately, it's up to you if you want to hag max as a young guy. But if you're that desperate, I would say basically exhaust all your possibilities before that happens. Check out everything possible before you engage in something that's probably not going to work out long term, and in large measure due to what you want. If you're 21, 20, 22, 23, whatever, do you really think you're going to want to date or to be together with a woman who's 20 years older than you in perpetuity? Because remember the reason why you're doing it. You're doing it because you perceive it as the only option you have. That's probably not the best reason to enter into any relationship, to be perfectly honest, let alone a relationship with somebody who's much older in a completely different stage of life at the end of the day. Anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in. Many special thanks to my patrons on Patreon and my donors on PayPal. You guys are the best. You keep this channel alive. Without you, there would be nothing. As for everybody else, if you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, it'd be much appreciated. Until the next time, if I'm still alive, I'll check you out then. May the gods watch over you. Bye-bye for now. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.